7 days a week. Every single person that contributes is a part of that St. Jude family that makes that happen. Because of everyone that is really committed to the mission of St. Jude, we're giving families hope.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. Be a part of the show by calling 915-544-KTSM, 915-544-5876, or comment online on our stream at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. It's 4 p.m. Mountain Time, and that means it's time to talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel, over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Ida Beza Gardner leading the way with the demonstration there. Hello to you as well, and the wave for those of you all out in Radio Land who can't see it. We mention all those places because, of course, we're still a radio show, and we will definitely be focused on those of you in your cars, at your actual radios. I actually got one the other day, better one that I had, a little bit more portable, because surprisingly enough, they don't have that great radio signal in this building. Life's full of ironies sometimes. We also have Austin Redfern. Good afternoon to you as well, chiming in over on the social media. But the reason we keep mentioning the social media is that, well, you can get the comments throughout, add your 2 cents, have your name said on the radio if you comment, that kind of a thing. Particularly if you comment in early, because once those comments start going fast and furious, hot and heavy, and the Thunderdome pops up, as it does most every time, the Skeptic Squad, or the Savage Squad, as it's sometimes been referred to there, seems to pop up just about every day, where there is nothing much sacred and everything is up for debate here. I mean, within good reason, of course, here. But otherwise, we got a lot of stuff we'll be getting into for you today. Okay, I'm not going to start trying to keep saying jam-packed out here. As well as Eric von Holstein-Rathlau chiming on over there. That's a wave or a rock on or a Spock hand. I'm assuming it's rock on there, because, well, the other two would work, I guess, but hey, yeah, whatever's up for you. There you go, Amber Banda, definitely with the rock on there. Do appreciate it. And so, again, demonstrating how you can leave your comments there and contribute to the show this way, even if we're just going through greetings at the moment. I appreciate a little bit of formality and politeness, at least before we delve into it. So another lot going on in this show here, a lot of political updates going on for you here, including response by El Paso's district attorney to the now moving towards a trial in the removal of the effort towards that, rather, from office there. So that one going to be, I can't think of another way to describe this besides one of the more drama-filled ways that a sitting elected official could be removed from office that I'm aware of. I mean, even going to like a ballot or a recall effort is, we'll just have to see what comes with it, but response from the district attorney in any case in that effort, as well as more politicos and other types of, data. We've got some voting data. I know that was asked yesterday and we didn't quite get to it today. And a good afternoon to Calvin Williams as well. You can, of course, hit the bell to be notified when we go online over on our various social media, though I guess maybe something doesn't work that time. We mentioned all the places that we're up in order for you to find what works best for you, because sometimes it happens. Glenn Stewart counting down 6 days to Election Day. Yep, we're getting there. Next Tuesday, of course, and so I'll take this moment to remind y'all that we are going to be having that live local election night coverage. Of course, we'll have the regular show that Tuesday, 4 to 6 p.m. We'll kind of call it like a Talk About Tuesday. I don't know, no better way to talk about it, because that will be our open line show for that week. So that'll be your chance to chime in, sound off on what's important to you, but also with a focus on the elections. But not only, we'll still be filling that need, as we will actually be out of the office the remainder of that week, if my head doesn't explode in the meantime. But then that evening, 7 to 9 p.m., we will be bringing you live local election night coverage with live results as they come in. Of course, polls close at 7, so make sure that you have either already voted or you're in line. If you're in line to vote, they cannot prevent you from voting, but if you're not there after 7 and we're not already in line, I'm going to be upset with you. I mean, more disappointed than upset, really, particularly if you were able to actually make sure you're registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote and you're eligible to do so, just go and register to vote right now so you're good for the next one. You don't have to face my ire, wrath, etc. And Matt Olson voted yesterday. So there you go. As promised, there's the bell in celebration of you doing that as well. Kelvin Williams saying, wish I wouldn't have voted early. Beto looking good now. Okay, if that's how you're taking it at this point here. I guess I've never really met one of those undecided voters in person, at least no one who's been willing to admit it to me. So that's interesting. And Austin Redfern voted just today for you as well there. And anyone else, one more for good measure for anyone else out there that can't chime in. If you voted today, just for you, thank you for doing so. And please make sure everyone you know that is able to do so goes out and votes as well. Like, no, don't drag your kindergartner, but maybe tell your kindergartner teacher or, child care associate. What do we call those these days? I feel like anyway. Austin Redfern saying voted at Bassett Mall, one of the better turnout locations so far. And Amber Banda voted yesterday. So there you go as well. Hope we get a lot of dings today because, frankly, we need more of them. Where he did hit those double digits, statistically speaking, I have a new goal that I'm hoping for, though I'm not going to hold my breath for. It's going to be 6 digits, not in voter turnout numbers, but in percentage-wise anyway, but in an absolute number of people actually going out to the polls, because that's roughly what it's going to take for us to get to like 20%. So I feel like feels better than say, let's shoot for 20% now, guys, as we just set the expectations low and continue to limbo below them, but not quite this time. Thankfully, we're doing a little bit better. James Holmes also voted yesterday, so there you go. Hopefully get more dingers going on here today. But yeah, I'm hoping that we can get to 6-figure voter turnout, meaning that we have at least 100,000 people of the local population going out to vote. Now, there is reason to hope that this actually goes through and not just a blind, it could happen. Anyone remember watching, was it Angels in the Outfield? The one little foster kid who had those kind of adorable buck teeth, and it could happen. I feel like that's sometimes what my voter turnout goals end up being, which is not a good way to be by any means, because just saying, well, let's just hope and pray real hard is, well, that works out for you, great. But let's just say in the aggregate, in the general, as political goal, maybe not the best strategy to go about there. And Matt Olson saying he voted at the Esperanza Costa Moreno Library. I did it Doris Van Doren here, and wasn't the most, but it was, did that over the weekend myself, but it has apparently been, according to the stats over on epcountyvotes.com, one of the bigger turnout area. And I definitely got to agree with you there, Austin Redfern, saying folks complaining about government that don't vote are shallow complaints. No vote, no right. If you have the right to vote and you don't use it, you are literally silencing yourself. And people say, well, I don't know how to choose between it. You're still making a choice. To quote the old Rush song on there, choose not to make a stand. You still have made a choice. And more people making their implored cries for how to vote there. However you're going to vote, just make sure you do it, because more than anything, I am very possessed of the idea that the fact that El Paso has this kind of, okay, Texas overall ain't looking so hot this time. I mean, midterm elections are, maybe not always the best one here. Texas Tribune showing that there's been roughly 20% of the voters, according to the various, and then Texas Secretary of State as well, voter turnout so far here in this early voting period. And we're a little bit behind the roughly about 5 million change that went out to vote so far. I mean, it is early voting and statistical numbers here for the most part. But yeah, the fact that we still are going to be lagging behind even 2018 is maybe disappointing, but I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. So that's why I say take everyone you want no there. And RJ saying that ding the other day was him chiming in and not voting. Ding. Did that today, and like all these candidates are declared elected, I didn't have to vote or not vote for them. Lots of them, like always. Yeah, that was the part depressing to me, looking at that sample ballot. But also, of course, once you finish up your vote, you got all these depending on exactly where you're located, because it'll show you the local races. But there are it's 2 pages if you look at it on the sample ballot, and not quite the full screen, at least the way it showed up on mine, of candidates running unopposed and therefore declared elected. The fact that there's so damn many of them just makes me sad in a way that's kind of hard to describe, because I mean, it's a good thing to be like, oh, that's bad, we need to do something about it. But I mean, how do you get more people willing to put their name out on the shingle like that? is a longer than just a I'm mad as hell, not going to take it anymore kind of moment here. Not that it even reaches that level, but seriously, it shows that we need more people involved, not less by any means. And that's why I still say that I want people to vote regardless of what they're going to do, because it's not exactly a rising tide raises all ships kind of analogy, but more people paying attention will tend to lend itself to whatever the percentage is that I'm sure demographers and sociologists can define there of the people who are going to be aware of something and therefore then take action on it. If we get more people into any part of that equation, will hopefully result in more people actually doing stuff out of it. RJ, 2 pages and tiny font as well. Yep, uncontested spots up for the election. There's a lot of them going on there, so that's why it makes me a little bit sad. But hopefully we get more people involved, and again, more people paying attention. And yes, I'm probably going to pull out this soapbox a couple more times pre and through election day. Maybe then we'll retire for like a couple of minutes, and we'll be right back into the 2024 discussion. Elections never end, y'all. Sometimes I do kind of envy the Brits and the parliamentary system where they can be done with an election in about 2 weeks. But then what would I do with the rest of my time? It's not really 2 weeks. It's more like 2 months. But still, when we got year-round and eternal elections at that point, I don't know. Maybe trying something else for a little while might be interesting. At the very least, we could visit it. Any case, got to take that first break of this hour right now. Talked a lot about elections and stuff here, but coming out of this break, going to be talking more about some of the economic development things going on in town. A couple of things top of mind I want to keep you in mind of is that there's an interesting study about downtown that our news partners at KFOX 14 will mention during the news update, but in our conversation with the Stephanie S. Seifert, investigative reporter with the same, going to be talking about some of the, larger and more, regional, even statewide and beyond economic development interests and how they kind of connect, pulling a thread through it here. So stay tuned for that and a whole lot more. We've got a lot of people tuning in, chiming in over on the social media. Keep those comments going, popping up the more or less relevant ones to the conversation we have coming up again with the Stephania. But of course, a whole lot more election numbers, updates, kind of last gasp efforts with the finance numbers and things like that. So all that and more to come here. Talk El Paso, you are tuned into as we are airing live and some other suggestions about how to fill my time. I think we'll focus on elections for now, but back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Again, comments over online, phone lines over a little bit later in the program as we usually do, opening those up. So however you're tuned in, you're in the right place, and stay tuned for more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
On your El Paso freeways, I-10 eastbound is slowing down. It's because of a minor crash involving a couple of vehicles already moved off to the right, but a 5-minute delay through the Spaghetti Bowl to Reynolds on I-10 eastbound. I-10 eastbound at Giles, a stalled truck's blocking the right shoulder, a stalled truck blocking the exit ramp on I-10 westbound at Airway, and an injury accident Executive Center Boulevard eastbound at Mesa Street. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
As you crunch the numbers trying to get the most out of your dollar, we'll throw in a $1,000 inflation bonus. Much better. Listen every hour from 9 a.m. through 5 p.m. weekdays for your chance to win $1,000.
Listen to win $1,000 every hour, weekdays from 9 a.m. through 5 p.m. It's the 1,000 inflation bonus on News Talk 690 a.m.
This report is sponsored by Dell Technologies.
Dell's Black Friday event starts early with savings on XPS and Alienware PCs powered by 12th Gen Intel Core processors, plus special pricing on accessories and free shipping. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
Politicians have led us down the wrong path. Record inflation and cost of living, unsafe border communities, a war on oil and gas jobs. Enough is enough. Catherine Parker will uphold our Texas values. A successful businesswoman and rancher, Catherine Parker will lower inflation and our cost of living. Catherine Parker will work to permanently lower your property taxes. Catherine Parker will stand up to the radicals who threaten our values and put our families in harm's way. Catherine Parker will secure our border communities and fully fund border security. Catherine Parker will stand with law enforcement and against those who want to defund our police, because our communities deserve to be safe. And Catherine Parker will defend the oil and gas jobs that power our communities. Truth, freedom, prosperity. Vote Catherine Parker for District 74 on November 8th. Political ad paid for by Catherine Parker Campaign.
New on Curiosity Stream, Darwin's theory of evolution, a scientific breakthrough, but 1920s Tennessee wasn't ready for it.
It became the Bible versus evolution.
Followed a heated trial that changed American education forever on Monkey in the Middle. And it's the country's deadliest highway.
There was something like 178 accidents in a 2-year period.
Don't miss the most dangerous road in America. Watch now on Curiosity Stream. Annual plans are $20, just $1.67 a month. Visit curiositystream.com.
If you're in a room with 4 other people, chances are one of you has already been an identity theft victim. 1 in 5. Watching your accounts and credit isn't enough. It can be dangerously easy to steal your identity. LifeLock by Norton makes it easy to help protect yourself. If you become a victim, LifeLock will work to fix it. Nobody can prevent all identity theft, but everyone can save up to 25% on their first year with promo code BECK at lifelock.com. Promo code BECK, save 25% off your first year.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages. We're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk, whichever works best for y'all. That's the place that you need to be so you can see the show, comment on it, or participate however you want to. Phone lines a little bit later in the program, as we usually do. But joining us here in studio right now, we do have Estefania Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Thanks for coming in, as we do most middle of the weeks here, even if it is an interesting week as we are in that continued countdown to Election Day. Touch on that in a minor way here in just a bit. But otherwise, of course, investigative reports are, well, your bread and butter, obviously, given the title and the name. But we're also in that season here where people have been seeing more kind of in-depth stuff coming out from, well, your fellow reporters as well. So one kind of particular narrative we wanted to pull through here is kind of a tale of economic development as well as changes and stuff, and particularly involving the land of enchantment, but also El Paso as well here, because there's a very interesting one that, Robert Holguin had come out recently. The Borderlands film community is booming, and this is, well, largely focused on New Mexico, but El Paso, of course, has a large part to play in it. So tell us a little bit about what was in that story.
Right. So KFOX 14 anchor Robert Holguin had a special report on how the movie industry seems to be shifting from Southern California to other regions such as the Southwest, particularly New Mexico. And that's largely in part because of the incentives that are offered.
Oh, yeah.
Which a lot of people ask, well, why aren't we seeing that in El Paso, but we're seeing it in Las Cruces? And really it has to do with Texas just doesn't offer the same incentives for film production as New Mexico does. And so that's really been booming in Albuquerque. Now we're starting to see it in Las Cruces. And so he really goes in depth into how that's evolved in New Mexico, how it's really grown, how the film industry is really basically just planting itself in New Mexico, if you will, just really growing there. And even just the way it works as far as they need a set, and people who have built, let's say, like a whole like warehouse or set, or even have the cameras that are very often used in California sets, and maybe film production crews here aren't used to having that type of equipment available to them, but now they do. And just how over the last couple of years that's really skyrocketed in this region.
Absolutely, because I mean we're talking about essentially infrastructure on a couple different scales here, both physical and or even sometimes the lack thereof when it comes to like backdrops, things like that. There have been some notable movies and film productions, some controversy, like the whole Rust situation. Not trying to focus on that, but one of the reasons it was here was both incentives and also backdrops. The fact that there's a lot of best way I can think to call it, unencumbered skyline, so to speak here. Like, sure, you can edit out, green screen, most anything you want here, but those costs do add up, particularly on the back end. If you're spending, dozens of hours per scene on just removing that one pesky telephone pole or skyscraper or stuff like that. So some of the areas lend themselves to it, but then there's the physical infrastructure, both in, there are some startups essentially trying to build out studio space. Not like they're going to try and usurp Hollywood or anything, because that's still dominant because it has the infrastructure, but trying to do that kind of indoor space, that set design space, the real controlled kind of indoor spaces, as well as like the technology you mentioned, but then the human infrastructure as well, the competency, the familiarity with these things, because sure, no one grows up or is born knowing how to perfectly do 3-point lighting, but once you have that kind of core competency there, it kind of makes it easier for someone to come in and do more of it. So that's kind of a snowball rolling kind of effect is kind of what we're looking at here.
Right. And even just the talent. There are so many people here who are so, in tune with the film industry and have created just great films and using the resources that they have here before all of these, developments happened with the film industry in New Mexico. And so it's crazy to see how it's taken off and how we can expect a lot of great things in the future in film coming out of the region that we're from.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of, if you look on, there are certain Facebook pages or other groups or websites out there that talk about like casting calls for the area here. And it definitely I can say anecdotally, I've seen what appears to be an increase. I can't point to like an exact stat here, but of more casting calls, of more kind of general looking for things in order to flesh it out. I mean, the amount of productions that I've been aware of the area. I have some friends that will travel to other parts of the state or even the country to then come and, get ready for production on stuff here that do that kind of like background or extra or small cast work kind of stuff here. Heck, I've even been approached once or twice about certain other, like, it definitely seems like it's an offshoot of the other stuff about background work or announcing or stuff like that, based on the fact that, well, people are coming here, and then it just kind of increases opportunity. So again, it's kind of a critical mass, it almost feels like, is another way to put it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, he talks about just the way that it's evolved even here locally. I mean, I know we talked about there being more in New Mexico than in Texas, but there have been films that have been made in Austin, and we have the El Paso Film Festival here.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, there's a lot going on, a lot happening in the borderland, and this is just one of the areas in which it's growing.
So not exactly so focused on film here, but economic development is kind of the thread we're going to be pulling through this and the segments here today. Again, if you're just joining us, guest right now is Stephania Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. You want to see some more of her investigative reports, as well as some of the things we're talking about, kfoxtv.com, and then specifically for her reports, the KFOX 14 Investigates tab. So, of course, one of the big bits of news coming out earlier this week was about Western Playland. That's kind of almost timeless and been there forever kind of since the 1960s, actually. Finding that out about some of the reporting, I didn't realize that it had actually been around in some fashion or another for that long, but that there's been going to be a bit of a shakeup and major changes coming, as that has now been bought, as the, again, longtime owner and operator is seeking to retire.
Right. So it is now going to be, the new owner is Traders Village Marketplaces, which, according to the website, it appears they have these types of parks, if you will, like amusement parks in Dallas and in Fort Worth. And so, yes, that has been announced. Like you mentioned, the owner is looking to retire. He says that, he's basically been operating this since the 1960s. And so it's been a family business. And they're now looking to enjoy retirement and pass it on to this new ownership. And with that, they have plans of what people can expect out of this amusement park and just larger scale events, if you will. And yeah, I mean, it's really vague right now what we can expect. I know they had mentioned a new roller coaster down the line. So yeah, I mean, it'll be exciting to see what comes out of this. As always, we're used to Western Playland opening and closing at certain times. It's not year round. And
that's true.
It will be closed by the end of November, and it will reopen February 2023.
So with that new ownership, they're looking to do more, amusement park things, but also things like making it more of a venue as well, which then maybe more vendor space or even a flea market, swap markets, those kind of things involved with it. So definitely looking to make it more multifunctional than it was, and not just kind of a place to go with the kids, the way I think people grew up thinking, I grew up thinking about it kind of thing. And so that's interesting. And of course, there are some other arguments I've made earlier this week about this may be interesting development of a potential entertainment corridor along Sunland Park Drive into the city of Sunland Park, including, of course, that potential arena space thing. Kind of, it's a little bit nebulous, but that potential that's going across from the actual Sunland Park racetrack and casino right across Sunland Park Drive and some of the other entertainment venues that have been popping up along Sunland Park Drive. Again, the threat of potential economic development and, again, well, just more entertainment specifically focused on that is very interesting. Of course, there's more talk that you also been doing, even with investigative and special reports in some other parts of the Land of Enchantment, not quite in that corridor, including an interesting one about the Double Eagle, right?
Right. So this is part of one of Liana Golden's special reports. If you're into these types of Halloween stories, if you will, or if you're into history, she looked into the Double Eagle and why some people call it haunted, and just the original owners or people who lived there. It used to be a home. It was built in 1849, and just the history behind it, the family who lived there, which their portraits are still in the restaurant. So next time you go, you probably will have a little more history on it if you check out this report. But that's also on our website, and she put it together. It was really fun to watch.
Absolutely. Again, guest right now, Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14, talking more about, again, some of the in-depth reporting going on, but as well as some of the more interesting aspects, both with Land of Enchantment, economic development on both sides of the state line here. So we got to take that next break right now. So Stephanie is sticking around with us, and back with you all after this next break here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hello, I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update. The fourth and final part of the Sun Metro's rapid transit system is finished with the completion of the Montana Brio. The new transit center in Brio will open on Sunday to the public. The Brio is expected to connect riders to every corner of El Paso, including the airport. It will run from the far east side to central El Paso along a 16-mile stretch of Montana. And the city of El Paso is working to find ways to revitalize downtown. The project currently in the works is called the Downtown Uptown Project. The goal is to revamp the area by making it a place where people can live but also play. According to a market assessment, more households are necessary downtown to achieve that goal. Data shows that the downtown and uptown area have the potential to offer more than 6,600 residential units in the next decade. The downtown area currently has about 400 units, including new low-income housing. I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, this is Chief Meteorologist Sandra Diaz. Well, our Wednesdays turned out to be another beautiful warm day, but tonight we should see a little more cloud cover and temperatures maybe a few degrees warmer. But it's really not until Thursday that we start to transition as our next storm approaches. So look for increasing winds and another warm day Wednesday with about a 15-degree drop and more winds for your Friday. Log on to kfoxtv.com for your latest forecast.
This report is sponsored by News Nation. Chris Cuomo is back with a new show on a new network. Catch Cuomo weeknights on News Nation at 6 and 9 p.m. Mountain. To find News Nation on your television provider, go to newsnationnow.com/join us.
Joe Biden's inflation is crushing Americans. Higher costs for gasoline, painful prices at the grocery store. Just about everything costs us more. And just like Biden, Beto O'Rourke supports higher taxes that would crush Texans even more. What does Governor Abbott say?
In Texas, we are fighting back, cutting property taxes to help homeowners, producing more energy to lower gas prices. And we passed a constitutional amendment to ban an income tax in Texas.
This election, you have a choice. With Beto O'Rourke, it's higher taxes, higher prices, and an economy that's being crushed. With Greg Abbott, it's lower taxes, lower prices, and an economy that's booming.
If you're tired of getting crushed by Biden's inflation, join us and keep Texas strong.
Greg Abbott for governor.
Political ad paid for by Texans for Greg Abbott.
Talk El Paso, bringing you the biggest stories from the borderland and beyond, 4 to 6 p.m. every weekday, brought to you in part by Sergio Lewis Body Shop. Call the pros at 915-593-0191. That's Talk El Paso, Monday through Friday at 4, right here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Political ad paid for by Texans for Greg Abbott.
Beto O'Rourke stands with radical groups who want to defund the police. Governor Abbott stands with law enforcement so they can keep Texas families safe. Greg Abbott, Governor.
This report is paid for by the Texans for Greg Abbott.
Because you never hear this.
Hey, hon, I'm late.
Chris, I am so pleased you missed the beginning of our meeting.
Thanks for making me wait, Dad. I talked to a lot of strangers.
Check on your commute. Stay informed. Traffic and weather all day. Or you might never hear the end of it.
Well, you were late to our anniversary dinner that one time.
Yes, how could I forget?
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM. News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in. However you may be doing so, a lot of ways to interact with the show. Phone lines a little bit later, as we usually do. But, of course, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch are the social pages under either Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk, or a few more on there, honestly, as well. You can leave your comments, or Twitter's more of a DM message response kind of thing. But still, we try to read those and respond to them as is relevant. But, of course, if you're on air, online, or live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, you're more than welcome. And want to chime in through any of those ways, you can do so safely. Please do so. But, of course, getting back into some of the stories affecting us here in the borderland, and joining us here in studio, as we have most Wednesdays, is Stephanie Cipher, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Thanks again for sticking around with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely happy to talk about some of the important things because, of course, your in-depth reporting that we'll talk a little bit more about here towards the end of the segment, what you got coming up. But, I mean, there's been a lot more in-depth. I mean, special report season, as people may be kind of familiar with, is kind of going on. So we've talked about a couple of those, but really there's an interesting, I think, kind of story to be looked at overall through a bunch of these kind of through lines through these stories here, including some visitors to New Mexico. A particular one I want to mention here right now, that the president is actually expected to go to New Mexico. A lot of focus coming from this administration and the White House on some of the races going on in the state ahead of this midterm election.
Right. So the White House had in a statement had said that President Biden would be taking part in events with the Democratic Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. You all know she's trying to win a second term in next month's election. And this comes after Vice President Kamala Harris traveled to Albuquerque last week for similar events to campaign with Lujan Grisham's campaign.
Absolutely. There again, specifically supporting her bid again against Mark Ronchetti. But also, I think there's probably more than a little bit focus on there, even if it's not mentioned as much on the New Mexico 2nd Congressional District. It is being pointed out largely as one of the biggest toss-ups in the nation. So that's why there's been a lot of big money being spent there. And I think, I mean, it does go into kind of like the outskirts, southern New Mexico. The congressional maps in New Mexico are not any less weird than ours here. Maybe very simple next to us in that it's everywhere our signal covers pretty much. But once you start getting up into the middle part of the state here, it gets a little bit, well, look for yourself here. It's hard to describe here. It's not a good concrete shape, but it's more or less the bottom half of the state and then kind of tap dancing around Albuquerque. That's the best way I can put it here. So I think there's more than a little bit of focus there, as we have also been, of course, talking about that race, having previously interviewed, of course, the Republican incumbent Yvette Harrell, seeking re-election for the New Mexico 2nd Congressional District. But I mentioned that one as kind of a case in point about another interesting aspect of what we were talking about, particularly in the first segment, as it involves economics, tourism, development, those kind of things, that there actually was a record high number of visitors that went to New Mexico last year.
Right. So it says here in an article, it's an AP article, but it has data from the Albuquerque Journal that New Mexico saw a record-breaking number of almost 40 million visitors last year. And they determined this based off of tax collections, lodging performance data, things like that, just to see how the state is doing. And it says that 39.2 million people went to New Mexico, generated $5.2 billion in spending across the state.
And $1 million more than in 2019, the previous record. And just because we were even talking about this is only for 2021, so not even this year so far. So very specifically, this does not include the state level legalized marijuana, or none of the tax revenues from that either. So that's very interesting, and there might be some other expectations that could be had for this year, and a reason that we'll be wanting to look at this again for this coming year. But it's, again, interesting to point this out, that this has been focused on, including looking at a trend coming since 2017, except for, of course, the pandemic and those couple of years, but that the tourism is an increasing focus. So given some of the other factors that we were talking about, such as with the film development, that can be a tourism driver on its own here, as well as some of the things like the entertainment corridor, it kind of seems like, again, snowball. Yeah, that's the kind of sense I keep coming away from this.
Right. So even just going back to Western Playland in Sunland Park, this is something that we had talked about a few weeks ago when I interviewed the mayor of Sunland Park and his idea of an entertainment district in the area, and really wanting to make Sunland Park an entertainment destination for people. And so we're really starting to see some of that growth here close to us, but also just all across New Mexico as well.
Absolutely. So again, the fact that we're seeing the tourism pick up, people willing to do things, and this is, again, even before some drivers in a certain way, let's just call them, more in place for the state, are very fascinating. Potential, it leads to maybe some, maybe cloudy crystal ball moments, but some extrapolation that could be had for this coming year, and how there was already expected this trajectory to continue, and with that added emphasis, that added focus, that added draw for certain people out there, I think it would be fair to say that it may continue.
Right. I think so too. Just with, we mentioned a few today with, the film industry, and we see a lot of growth in Albuquerque, and even just in places where people probably didn't think of visiting, like, Sunland Park, which is smaller than Albuquerque. And now we're starting to see movement there. So definitely something happening in the land of enchantment.
And of course, as it connects to El Paso and the borderland area, makes sense. It's something worth talking about here. Again, if you're just joining us, guest right now is Stephania Seifert, an investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Again, any of the stories we're talking about, kfoxtv.com, or to see her reports, specifically her in-depth and investigative reporting, I'll look under the KFOX 14 Investigates tab there. Again, kfoxtv.com. But so not just to say that, kind of be rah in a sense on New Mexico. Economic development and changes in it are always a factor. And as much as we're talking about outskirts, there's been a lot of discussion about how some of the biggest growth areas, and particularly El Paso, or the county of El Paso, has been on the outskirts of the city of El Paso. That's where some of the reason that the district maps change is because the pole is kind of towards the edges, so to speak. But there's been more focus as well on some of the interior areas, particularly like, east of downtown, south of the railroad tracks, or the former switching yards kind of area, which kind of previously an industrial area, a lot of warehouses. But I have noticed some other reporting has been going on, and you all have some reporting as well, on the focus on, redevelopment plans, and even business movements been happening there.
Right. All across really downtown. And I don't, if you pull up an article that's regarding the Alameda corridor, it kind of touches on that a little bit, and how the growth in population has really caused a lot of this movement, and a lot of this, these like projects, if you will, just to connect certain parts of the city to other parts outside of the city.
Right.
And so that's one of the projects, the Onward Alameda Corridor Plan, that's in the works as well.
Yeah, again, an interesting focus on there, the one I was referring to previously along like Texas Avenue as well. So kind of those east of downtown, but the Onward Alameda plan goes all the way into the city of Socorro, is where it's really also being considered here. So the focus is on those economic development, but also challenges do still abound in their own right here, including more of a focus on how remote work is changing, not just even the nature of how people work. And I never really thought that genie was going to go back into the bottle once that kind of, cork was popped on saying that, sure, as long as you can get work done, you don't have to come into the office. That's going to still have its own reverberating effects on, heck, we've seen it locally as well with some major and, major listed companies such as Helen of Troy comes to mind, looking to significantly downsize except for bare physical requirements. Like they still want warehouse space, they still need the manufacturing, but they're not really feeling the need for the office space anymore. So that kind of a trend on the corporate side is one thing, but also then on the workforce side, it's kind of been a thought for a minute now of, well, if I don't need to be physically located anywhere specifically to work, where can I be located? And that is, of course, not even just for people who are looking to move out of high profile, expensive areas, New York City, Chicago, LA come to mind, definitely, but even affecting the workforce already here in El Paso.
Yeah, so our reporter, Jonathan Mejia, did a story on this. He spoke with Workforce Solutions Borderplex and how there's currently more than 16,000 unemployed people in El Paso. And just the trend of why there are so many businesses that are still struggling to hire. I think you go anywhere and you still see the hiring signs at a lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants. And there's several factors in that. I think people got a taste of remote work and they liked it. I think they felt it was very, flexible for their work life routine. Also, for some people, they're able to maybe make more if they're working remotely for a company that's based out of another state. So wages may be different, opportunities may be different. So maybe, in other cases, someone would have had to have moved to another city, another state, and now they can work, in the company that they want to work for, but in the comfort of their home without having to move. So yeah, there's just different factors that play into why we're continuing to see this trend of people needing to hire and there not being enough employees for these businesses that are still struggling to be fully staffed.
That may have thought about, okay, traditional staffing levels, traditional availability of workforce here, and traditions no longer maybe necessarily holding up because, if you previously had to relocate to get a job and getting those economic differences in place wouldn't have worked out for you, if all it requires is a laptop and a good internet connection, that's a whole lot lower barrier to entry for someone doing entry-level work in completely, even switching careers, that kind of a thing. So that'll be a fascinating trend just to keep our eye on, but also particularly, again, affecting us here in the borderlands. So kind of these different stories and interesting things about economic development and changes going on in the larger region, including, of course, New Mexico, southern New Mexico, and the borderland region. But of course, you do have more of your investigative reports coming up, including one coming up tonight, right?
Yeah, so this is the one that I've been teasing you all about, the trip that we took to Dallas. And it has to do with the stories that we've been covering in the past couple of weeks with what the DEA is seeing here in El Paso in terms of an increase in fentanyl. So you'll finally be able to draw the connection as to why we had to travel to Dallas for this story. And they'll be airing tonight.
Absolutely here. So again, I guess right now has been Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Again, if people want to get a hold of you, add their 2 cents or give you any suggestions for any further reports as you have often followed up with, what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, through social media or through email, eyseyffert@kfoxtv.com.
Again, Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14 to find the story coming out tonight, airing on KFOX 14 News at 9, kfoxtv.com, and then look for the web story over on KFOX 14 Investigates tab there again, kfoxtv.com. So Stephanie, thank you very much for coming in and talking with us as we do most Wednesdays about some of the big stories going on and happening in the region.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll go ahead and get that next break and open up those phone lines as we usually do at this point during the program. So if you want to get on the line, add your 2 cents. That number to call is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
On your El Paso freeways, an earlier crash I-10 eastbound at the Copia Street exit is still slowing traffic. That crash is cleared a while ago, but still an 8-minute delay from Cotton to Paisano. Executive Center Boulevard eastbound at Mesa, an injury accident with police medical on the scene. Try Brentwood Avenue or Stanton as your alternates. Montwood eastbound at Joe Battle, there's an injury accident. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is paid for by the Texans for Greg Abbott.
Political ad paid for by Texans for Greg Abbott.
Beto O'Rourke stands with radical groups who want to defund the police. Governor Abbott stands with law enforcement so they can keep Texas families safe. Greg Abbott, Governor.
There's only one dental office in El Paso where beautiful, top-quality, long-lasting dental implants are very affordable. 1995implants.com. Other places charge $3, $4, $5, up to $6,000 per tooth. Please don't ever pay that much for dental implants. Instead, come to 1995implants.com. Our price includes the implant, abutment, and crown, plus a free consultation with the dentist, free standard x-rays, and convenient financing plans to fit your budget. With help from 1995implants.com, you'll no longer have cracked or missing teeth, and you'll finally be able to say goodbye to loose, old, wobbly, worn-out, uncomfortable dentures. If you're ready for a brand new smile that family and friends will rave about, then come to 1995implants.com, conveniently located right here in El Paso. For more information, see our website, 1995implants.com. That's 1995implants.com. Se habla español.
Get ready for the smartest bundle in streaming. 6 streaming services for the intellectually curious, featuring Curiosity Stream with the best collection of documentary films and TV shows, Psalm TV, and great stories from the world of wine, Taste Made for the fun side of food and travel, Topic with the best thrillers and crime stories, and so much more. From nature to history, technology to food, mystery to adventure. Get 6 streaming services for one low price at less than $6 a month. It's the best deal in streaming. Learn more and sign up now at smartbundle.com.
Tune in to the El Paso History Radio Show this Saturday, 10 to noon, here on 690 AM with your host, Andrew J. Polk, brought to you in part by Pepe's New Mexican Restaurant and Cantina, 6761 Donovan Drive. That's the El Paso History Radio Show, 10 a.m. Saturday, right here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
For more than 20 years, the Window Depot has provided the best price and the biggest inventory on in-stock vinyl windows. And now, the Window Depot is more than a window store, offering homeowners and contractors a one-stop warehouse offering interior and exterior doors, granited quartz countertops, in-stock cabinetry, and skylights to finish your project. Their team of professionals will help with everything from free kitchen design to custom orders from leading manufacturers like Milgard and Geldwin. Order online or find a location near you at thewindowdepot.com.
Chris Cuomo is back with a new show on a new network. Catch Cuomo weeknights on News Nation at 6 and 9 p.m. Mountain. To find News Nation on your television provider, go to newsnationnow.com/join us.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages. We are up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, more or less the main one, where most of the comments come in, and also those likes and reacts happen. And Calvin Williams accused me of being an elitist, saying with all this inflation, Andrew wants us to add our 2 cents. Such an elitist there. Fine, drop a dime on the line if you want to call in. Yes, I know that means something else, but hey, if we're going with the inflation analogy, 10 cents I think is the least we could end up putting there. So however you want to do it. Also, again, comments, we've been posting some of them up here, including touching discussion about what exactly has been going on with some of our those economic development things we're kind of talking about. Thanks again to Estefania Seifert with our news partners there at KFox14. And there was at least one interesting comment, of course, from the news update there as well from a little bit in the half hour. And I'm trying to find that comment here because I think it's definitely a relevant one. The idea of there being some housing analysis in downtown El Paso and what is or might be needed. I think it was Flaco Jimenez who said it. Missing it at the moment, but in any case, the idea of there being more downtown or uptown housing needed to turn. We've talked about this a couple of times in the show. I do feel like about how sure downtown revitalization is important, but if it's just a place that people visit, like for work, okay, go to for work, it doesn't really count as a visit, and then leave and nothing else happens down there, it's kind of one-sided, isn't it? So the idea of there actually being housing and the supportive services required for it, among other things like grocery stores, other pharmacies. I mean, there's some of those things in some ways, but enough to support a truly resident population in that immediate area is one of the questions. But the question Flaco asks is, where's uptown El Paso? And honestly, That's a pretty good question. I guess if you're just looking kind of geographically, it would be the concept I have in mind would be that maybe just north of I-10, essentially, right there. But also, wouldn't we call that Sunset Heights? I don't know. That's why I'm a little bit confused because I've never really heard an area surrounding downtown being referred to as uptown. So maybe that'll be a new one we'll get more answers on coming out here. But I want to get at least one phone call in before we hear. Oh, there we go. Flaco Jimenez. Thank you for responding to my question with your question as intended here. So, I mean, it's an interesting point to be made here, and hope we can find out more details on that study here. But let's get at least one call before we hit that first break of the hour right now. We do have Raul in the Northeast on the line with us here right now. Raul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. Well, I think this is local. I got this flyer in my mailbox today,
Mhm.
and this says, and it's from the America First Legal Foundation, okay? And so it says, Joe Biden, progressive politicians, and their left-wing allies in government are pushing radical and irreversible gender experiments on children, okay? And then on the back of it, it says, Joe Biden and his left-wing allies are indoctrinating your children into believing that biological sex is not real. Now, this is right-wing, what I call Trump-Putin propaganda. And only lemmings in Trump's cult would believe these fallacious claims. Parents nominally have control over their kids, and adolescents have some bodily autonomy. And school boards and school administrators run the schools where they are not pushing this other things like giving children off-label use drugs, like puberty blockers that stop children from developing into healthy males and females, cutting off healthy breasts and genitalia, injecting young boys with female hormones that are given to sex offenders to cause sterilization, giving girls testosterone to make them appear as males, and secretly calling boys by girls' names and using incorrect pronouns in school. So again, I reiterate, parents normally have control over their kids' lives. And adolescents have some bodily autonomy. Now, my father would not have allowed me to get tattooed or pierced. He would have kicked me out of the house like he threatened to do so if I didn't get a haircut acceptable to him. So parents are the key, not Joe Biden, not the leftist Democrats or the progressives. That is nonsense. I am a leftist, okay? I am a progressive. I am a liberal. And I'll tell you, I'm not for any of those stuff. And none of the folks that I know are for it. So these are outright lies on the behalf of Republicans or right-wingers. Now, I'll end with this. Steve Schmidt, you probably know who he is, right, Andrew? He was one of John McCain's communication strategists, one of the big shots.
Can't say I was the most familiar with him, but
the GOP is an organized conspiracy to maintain power for self-interest and their donors. There is no fidelity to the American ideal or American democracy, says Steve Smith.
of course, he's entitled to his opinion and you to yours on that, even if it may not come as a surprise to people about your own espoused positions on this. Tell you what, there's actually more wrinkles to this flyer, this piece of propaganda, as you refer to it. I mean, anything being set out from a candidate on elections technically kind of fits the definition of propaganda. They're trying to convince you to take an action on more or less their behalf here. But we got to take that break right now, so appreciate the point in the call. We'll talk more about that because there is more action actually going on involving that flyer that you're referring to there, but we got to take that top of the hour break and talk more about the things coming up here. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after the break. Again, if you want to get on the line, that number to do so, 915-544-5876, 544 KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso. You're on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Still a lot of stop and go on the I-10 eastbound from Prospect to the Patriot with 10-minute delays. It's even slower on the 54 Patriot southbound from Kenworthy down to the 10 with 18-minute delays. An injury accident, Sean Haggerty at Gateway South, and a crash with injuries is slowing traffic eastbound Executive Center Boulevard at North Mesa Street. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Integrity, proven experience, hard work, passion. These are the qualities we get by keeping Justice Jeff Alley at the 8th Court of Appeals. He graduated in the top 10% of his law school class, practiced law 29 years in El Paso before coming to the 8th Court, where he has been for the last 8 years. The only candidate in this race who is board certified in civil appellate law, a principled conservative who fairly applies the law as written. We need to keep Justice Jeff Alley.
Political ad paid for by Justice Jeff Alley in accordance with the voluntary limits
News
of
on the hour
Judicial
and the
Campaign
half.
Fairness Act.
Traffic and weather all day. News Radio 690 is KTSM AM El Paso, an iHeart radio station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. The man who killed more than a dozen people in a Florida school shooting in 2018 will never be free again. Judge Elizabeth Schur sentenced Nicholas Cruz and praised victims' families.
The way that you have grieved so gracefully and have shown extraordinary restraint throughout this process is something that I've never seen.
Cruz killed 17 people on Valentine's Day at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. Wall Street is closing with stocks lower after the Federal Reserve announced another interest rate hike. Liz Warner reports.
In an effort to combat inflation, the central bank raised interest rates by 0.75 percentage point. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said it's premature to talk about pausing rate hikes, and he said there's a ways to go. At the closing bell today, the Dow fell 505 points. I'm Liz Warner.
A new poll has suburban white women swinging 27 points from Democrats to Republicans. Just days before the midterms, the Wall Street Journal shows that voter bloc favoring the GOP by 15 percentage points since the last poll taken in August. A large majority of the women polled say the economy is far and away the biggest issue. The FBI is announcing a multi-state bust in connection with a catalytic converter theft ring. Federal officials raided a home in Holmdel, New Jersey, belonging to the head of the firm DG Auto Parts. Officials say the company was among businesses buying stolen catalytic converters and selling them. A witness in the Oath Keepers' seditious conspiracy trial says the far-right group's leader asked former President Trump to arrest members of Congress after last year's Capitol riot. Stuart Rhodes wrote in a message addressed to the former president that you and your family will be imprisoned and killed by the Biden administration. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio. U.S.-listed Chinese stocks rallied following unconfirmed reports saying Beijing is preparing to phase out its zero-COVID policy.
The Nasdaq Golden Dragon Index of 65 Chinese companies closed 3.8% higher on Tuesday. It had rallied as much as 7.6% during the session, with travel-related picks among the top gainers. That following social media posts saying China is forming a committee to relax its pandemic response and that it set a target for reopening in March. But at a press briefing in Beijing, spokesperson Zhao Lijian said he was not aware of it. Patrick Falk, Beijing.
A statue of the late Queen Elizabeth will be unveiled in England next week. It's happening about 200 miles north of London. King Charles and the Queen Consort will be on hand for the ceremony. The statue was set to be revealed in September. However, that's when the Queen passed away. There will be heavy security for the New York City Marathon this Sunday. Scott Pringle has more.
The NYPD will be using counterterrorism heavy weapons teams, bomb-sniffing dogs, and sand-filled dump trucks to help keep runners and spectators safe. Police Commissioner Keyshawn Sewell says every runner will be screened at the start on Staten Island, and handheld ones will be used at all access points along the route.
The NYPD's uniform presence will be evident. Our efforts will again include much the public will see and much you will not see.
Backpacks, coolers, signs, glass containers, and drones are all banned.
A monkey smuggler is heading to prison. A Texas woman has pled guilty to breaking customs laws. Savannah Valdez was stopped when agents saw a wooden box in her car that was filled with holes. She said it was full of beer. Instead, it was hiding a spider monkey. The 20-year-old hit the gas and got away, but she was caught when she started posting online monkey adoption ads in the Houston area. Now she faces up to 2 decades behind bars. Brian Shook, NBC News Radio.
Now your chance to win $1,000. Just enter this nationwide keyword on our website. WIN. That's WIN. Enter it now.
This report is sponsored by Lowe's. It's Pro Time because at Lowe's it's Provember. Over 30 days to save big. Full of more inventory, more Lowe's MVPs bonus points, and more of the deals you deserve. Because it always pays to be a pro at Lowe's. Save all Provember long.
The El Paso Community Foundation supports the causes you feel passionate about here in the borderland, whether it's education, social services, arts and culture, the environment, health, or economic development. The El Paso Community Foundation has been promoting philanthropy and progress in our hometown region for more than 45 years. Make your mark with us. Start a fund today for good, for El Paso, forever. Learn more at epcf.org. That's epcf.org.
Politicians have led us down the wrong path. Record inflation and cost of living, unsafe border communities, a war on oil and gas jobs. Enough is enough. Catherine Parker will uphold our Texas values. A successful businesswoman and rancher, Catherine Parker will lower inflation and our cost of living. Catherine Parker will work to permanently lower your property taxes. Catherine Parker will stand up to the radicals who threaten our values and put our families in harm's way. Catherine Parker will secure our border communities and fully fund border security. Catherine Parker will stand with law enforcement and against those who want to defund our police, because our communities deserve to be safe. And Catherine Parker will defend the oil and gas jobs that power our communities. Truth, freedom, prosperity. Vote Catherine Parker for District 74 on November 8th. Political ad paid for by Catherine Parker Campaign.
A construction site is a noisy place where things can be misinterpreted. We need to redo the drywall. It can sound a lot like,
rewire the hall? They're firing Paul?
wait, what did I do? Or even,
Install a waterfall! Whose dumb idea was this?
be on the same page at every stage with Autodesk. From the designers to the field crew to the owner of the finished building. Autodesk Construction Cloud gives everyone clarity. Now, how about that drywall?
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Yeah, a lot of ways and a lot of comments coming in there. Some of those dropping those likes and reacts so far, with a lot of a lot of other comments coming in, including Calvin Williams claiming the title of monkey smuggler based on that top of the hour news break there. But dropping those likes and reacts, again, if you like what we're doing here or the ability to talk about these things, that's what we take it as. Not necessarily anything specific we're talking about, because yeah, it's well, we definitely talk about a lot of diverse topics here, but Flaco Jimenez, Calvin Williams, Amber Banda, Lorenzo Colon, Ida Beza Gardner, Richard Janessi, Glenn Stewart, Marky Mandingo, Carla Sierra, James Holmes, Matt Olson, Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, I think I said that one already, or Angel Rueda. Well, if you want to add your points on there, again, let us know. Helps with those algorithmic things. But, of course, the phone line's open as well. If you want to get on the line that way, that number to do so is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Some discussion of school boards going on in the comments here. And just as a note, there are school board elections. I mean, CISD comes primarily to mind, along with, of course, their bond election, the Canutillo Independent School District. We have not focused on that one as much because we have had quite the full docket of elections coverage and have been squeezing it in as best we can and focusing on a lot more of the, well, other elected official positions, the non-school board ones. But don't forget that's out there, particularly if you live in the district. Apparently where I live now, I'm kind of like the cusp of it, but it's not in mine. But if you are there, please do make sure you go out and vote and, know the candidates and who supports you there. There are a lot of questionnaires and candidate surveys that have been done out there. Again, most of the other El Paso named organizations in terms of local journalism, El Paso Inc., El Paso Times, El Paso Matters. I'm sure there's something else out there with El Paso and adjective on it or something like that. Point is that, please know who you're going to vote for and why you would want to do so for, I think it's 10 candidates, 3 seats up for grabs in Canutillo specifically, but more of the commentary and other things going on there and the thinking about it. I think that's the idea of again, talking about that flyer as I came up with the last caller. The reason I said there's more to say about the here is that actually has been further action being at least, well, asked for at this moment here, right before our show today. Actually, a release out from Congresswoman Veronica Escobar's office saying that she has now sent a letter to the Internal Revenue Service for potential violations of the Internal Revenue Code by the America First Legal, the authors of 90% sure that this is the same organization. I'm practically 100% sure, given the description being given here. So that's very interesting that there has been more action taken on this, basically on the factor that that organization, the America First Legal, is organized as a 501c3, and is then by doing such a thing, the Congresswoman letters says is in violation of those regulations for tax-exempt organizations of that size, scope, and style. So that's one of those updates and one of the things I wanted to bring up there. But onto the core idea of essentially parents and children and rights back and forth here. I think the idea of parents having control over and, influencing their kids' growth, development, upbringing, those kind of things is kind of the point, to my understanding, because saying that you want that to be paramount would be, I think, again, kind of the crux of the arguments we've been dealing with here. But we got more comments and points on the line here as well. Again, if you want to call in during the show, the number to do so is 915-544-5876, 544 KTSM. We do have Mike on the east side here with us right now. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely there. What's on your mind?
The gentleman that was on the call before the break,
Mhm.
that was ranting about the, I guess, obviously his opposition to the flyer that he got that was pointing out the left-wing antics. I have lived in both San Diego, California, as well as Phoenix, Arizona, where this very actual thing was going on with the school board. And I can tell you it is very real. And he likes to think that maybe he is a left wing. That's fine. I don't care. But when they do this sort of thing in our public schools, do understand that the public schools are paid for by both right side and left side taxpayers. And for us to put out information like that to inform the public, it is our right. And I guess he probably thinks it's okay if you get censored like they do on Twitter, and that would work great for him. He wants no opposition. He doesn't want to hear the other half, and he doesn't think any of this stuff is going on when, in fact, it's pervasive throughout the U.S. thanks to the teachers' unions and such that are pushing this in the school. So he really has no leg to stand on, and he's not quoting you anything that would give you any good statistical or substantive research that would say otherwise, because it is going on. Everyone that says it's not are the ones that will say it's just not going on, and they don't give you proof that it's not. So that's what I wanted to say.
No, sure thing. Well, thank you for the point in the call. Do appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks.
I mean, I think in a lot of these things, I mean, the specific situations that we're talking about here are significant in their own right, and I don't mean to downplay those here, but I mean, both legally, morally, I would argue, but specifically legally, there is a responsibility that a parent has to their children. There's a reason that we talk about, like, the age of majority, leaving, being a minor, 18 years old. That's, I mean, it came up yesterday or earlier this week. It's a little bit of a blur, honestly, about the point of legal consequences for things that children have done for their parents, and that is very much a reality here. You're legally responsible, and that's why we talk about legal guardianship and all of those kind of the broken down things. And so anything that kind of like it seeks to circumvent that is often something that I'm very dubious about without given insanely good reason. I mean, sure, there may be circumstances where it is that the parent has done something bad to the child, and therefore these things need to be addressed and removed. Those things are adjudicated in such a way, but anything that seeks to circumvent that is just kind of like a matter of rote, regardless of what the situation here is or what the situation in general is. Again, we're talking about a specific one here on this subset of issues, but I mean, it's basically, again, legally and I think morally required that the parent be involved. Saying that, well, the parents, they're not need to be involved here. Just, if anyone was telling me that about my kid, that, well, you don't really need to know what's going on with your kid, I'd be very much in that person's face until found out what the hell is going on. And again, anything that circumvents that, regardless of the circumstance, is just, again, dubious at best and definitely needing to be looked at for a hell of a lot more. So yeah, I mean, there are maybe things and experiences, and I guess when it starts to go the further opposite way of saying that, well, kids kids obviously need to be protected, but even then it can theoretically go too far if you're keeping children specifically ignorant and unable to therefore deal with the situations they're going to have to deal with in the world. Age appropriate has to be done, of course. Here, you're not going to throw a physics level high school textbook at a kindergartner, nor would you take them to any other class of that level at that scope. And that applies across the board here. But also, you can't say that, well, we don't want them to have to deal with this in life, so we're not going to do it. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if you're not, again, focused on essentially children becoming fully functioning adults in the long run over the course of their education and their growth and through, adolescence and etc., you're just setting them up for failure and therefore leading for other situations that can happen, such as, well, predation on them based on things like, oh no, we don't talk about those kind of things. So there is a level of education that needs to happen, and some of these things juggling and considering for my own life whenever those kind of circumstances occur. Let's just say in some total mildly terrifying, trying to figure out how to navigate through these waters of how the world exists today. I'm not sure it was ever exactly simpler, but it definitely seems to be more complicated than it ever was. Calvin Williams putting it pretty well. Teach children how to think, not what to think. I mean, that's a decent way to put it. But also, I mean, there's some facts that need to get into there as well. Any case, let's get to at least one more call on the line before we hit that next break. Again, if you want to call in, that number to do so is 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have Barbara on the west side with us here right now. Barbara, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to remind people to go out and vote.
Oh,
and this
absolutely.
Is why, and I'm going to remind them why we're voting. 2 years ago, propane in Cloudcroft to fill my tank cost between $550 and $600.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday it was $1,100.
Mm.
Propane, same tank, same amount of propane, and it's $1,100. Today I received my gas bill here in El Paso. I was paying about $45 a month, $45, $50 on average.
Mm.
It was now $142.
Mm.
I filled up my tank with gas before, approximately $50. Now it's $80. This is why we have to go out and vote all these people out of office. And starting with our Representative Escobar, because she advocates and she supports all of Biden's policies that increase our taxes and inflation is where it's at. And then the reason to vote these people out locally, if we'll remember, and especially propositions A, B, and C. On the infrastructure, I'll remind everybody, one of the city council individuals that's running for office told us at that forum that the monies that were supposed to be used for infrastructure were used in other places. And then regarding the parks and recreation, how many times have we lost money on anything like that? And how many times have these projects been on time and on budget? And now the Fed is threatening to, well, not even threatening, it's just telling us it's going to raise the interest rates again. And then climate, number 3, that is such an open-ended thing. I don't think that the city thought further than just putting it on the ballot as to what the consequences of any climate propositions for the city of El Paso would be. And then lastly, I heard Raul, and he was talking about the flyer he received. And let's remember that America First Legal, Stephen Miller, is the individual that Escobar said was, and she called him this, not the policies that he worked on, but him, was a reprehensible and abhorrent individual who should be in jail. And I guess her saddest day is that he was able to go out and get a job after working on the immigration policies for President Trump, which kept us safe, which you didn't see the incidents that we see now at our borders. Venezuelans carrying a flag and apparently assaulting our border patrol. We didn't see any of that. We didn't see 149 countries coming to our doors, but we see it now. But that's the type of people she hates, those that, wanted a policy for us. And then Raul, on this transgender flyer that he got, he should do some research. President Biden threatened to take away the money from the school lunch program for the needy children. he should research Rachel Levine, who is Assistant Health and Social Services Secretary, what those are. And he should read on President Biden's policies for trans bathroom policies. And I put a link on we discussed this last week. I put a link on your website where President Biden specifically stated that people should do whatever they want, and that includes using your gender identity for the public bathrooms. Raul needs to look beyond the words, look behind those flyers, do some research, and understand that this is happening in our schools to our children. This Rachel Levine is a trans woman, and she said that these surgeries are lifesavers. And then you talk to psychologists and pediatricians, and they say the truth, that this is dangerous for kids. It ruins them emotionally, mentally, and physically. And I believe there's more suicides in the trans community than any other community. There are even groups who are trans people and gays who are gathering with other groups to oppose what they're trying to do in the schools. That ought to open people's minds. They are harming our children, irreversibly suggesting surgeries and medications that will change their whole lives, and some of them won't survive it. So Raul needs to do some research and take it with a grain of salt that Escobar is asking the IRS to investigate America First Legal. Keep in mind that the FBI had a satellite office in Perkins Coie Law Firm who represents the DNC and Clinton. And then here we have America First sending this out. You don't know who's in that building, number one. It could be another organization, same suite, just like the FBI having that satellite office. So there's a lot of factors to take into consideration before condemning somebody immediately because you don't like what you read or you feel differently. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with feeling differently and having a different opinion. But it is to condemn because you see a flyer and think, oh boy, I oppose this. But anyway, thank you, Andrew. Go vote, everybody. Vote.
Absolutely.
Vote for A, B, and C. There's a lot of people, a lot of organizations here in El Paso that I wasn't even aware existed that are out there for the propaganda. So vote no.
All right. Well, thank you for the point in the call. Do appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew.
One thing that I did get, speaking of voting flyers, got the one on the El Paso Community Progress Bond from the, what's the actual organization? El Paso Progress Political Action Committee, based on San Francisco Avenue here in El Paso. For Proposition C, just for what you're referring to there, says that for that $5 million, roughly $5.2 million. They call it the Climate Action and Urban Energy Plan. And so again, according to the flyer here, you're not going to find this on the ballot. According to the flyer here, that it will address flooding, rising temperature and water supply, funding to make El Paso more efficient, and electric vehicles and solar energy infrastructure funding are the items they list here as what this money would be put towards here. So, again, not sure if that's less nebulous to you or not here, but being informed about what the bonds are and what they would come with are, I think, very important here so you can make your decision. So, got to take that next break right now. After this break, coming out and taking more comments on the line here, as well as more calls. Again, if you want to get on the line, the number to do so is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Stop and go traffic on the 54 Patriot southbound between Pershing past the 10 Gateway to Alameda Avenue with 10-minute delays. 12-minute delays on the 10 eastbound from Wrestler over to the 54 Patriot. Got a stalled semi blocking the right shoulder. Joe Battle northbound at Pelicano. And a crash with injuries is slowing traffic southbound Sean Haggerty at Gateway South. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
News Radio 690 KTSM and Scott Heating and Cooling want to provide a local veteran with a heating and cooling system upgrade. Tell us about a deserving veteran you know who would benefit from a free new refrigerated AC unit. Who are they? How have they positively impacted you, their families, and the community? Nominate a veteran you know today at KTSMradio.com.
This report is paid for by the Texans for Greg Abbott.
Political ad paid for by Texans for Greg Abbott.
Beto O'Rourke stands with radical groups who want to defund the police. Governor Abbott stands with law enforcement so they can keep Texas families safe. Greg Abbott, governor.
Here come Rock and Roll Hall of Famers. Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. January 26th at Plaza Theater. 19 top 10 hits with Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Tickets on sale this Friday, 10 a.m. at Ticketmaster.com. Don't miss Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, produced by Red Tail Live.
Help the planet with a tip from iHeartRadio Earth. Education doesn't just take place in the classroom. There are many ways for children of all ages to learn about sustainability and environmental education at home. Visit iHeartRadio.com/Earth for a list of resources, activity guides, and toolkits that are educational and fun for the whole family. Brought to you by iHeartRadio Earth and the National Environmental Education Foundation. To find more tips for smarter, sustainable living, or to take action in your own community, go to iHeartRadio.com/Earth.
Ad paid for by the Sentinel Group. Attention Marines, military personnel, families, and contractors who were stationed at Camp Lejeune. Were you present at Camp Lejeune between August 1953 and December of 1987? You may be entitled to significant compensation. For nearly 34 years, those in the Marine Corps' base Camp Lejeune were exposed to contaminated drinking water, resulting in devastating injuries, including several forms of cancer, adverse birth outcomes, Parkinson's disease, and more. North Carolina's procedural laws have prevented victims from getting the justice they deserve, but passage of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022 would allow you or a loved one to file lawsuits seeking compensation for illnesses and injuries linked to the toxic water. Call today for your free consultation. 800-484-9358. Let our experienced attorneys fight to get you the compensation you deserve, and you pay nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call 800-484-9358. That's 800-484-9358. Again, 800-484-9358.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter @Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. A lot of comments coming in there and a lot of different conversations, and some other conversations, including about rare earth minerals and things like that. One of the more interesting points that have come up recently with some of the elected officials, or wannabes anyway, those seeking election, I should say. Wannabes has I didn't mean to sound as derisive as it is, but they definitely want to be an elected official if they're running for it. So maybe it's more accurate than I give myself credit for. But about the idea of more rare earth mineral mining in this area, I mean, there's been that whole idea of a company for a better part of a decade, if not longer now that I've been aware of it, kind of in the Sierra Blanca area or the Waco Mountains, that kind of thing, though. Startup efforts of that are immense. I mean, it's like 9 figures at the get-go, because you have to have all that ready to go to start getting it. You can't we'll just start at the top and work our way down, eventually need bigger stuff. No, you have to have all the machinery right at the start to get that going. So that's part of the problem here. Lorenzo Colon asking specifically, does anyone know the number of the polls? So if you're asking about exit polling, those kind of things, I mentioned that there's at least one effort I'm aware of in town doing it unscientifically. There's been a little bit more information put out there today by others, apparently, on the Fair Data Organization, including those involved with it. I'll have some more upcoming conversations with them on their efforts and those kind of things. So stay tuned for that, probably a bit after the election. But suffice it to say, there's not really exit polling, nothing conclusive to be pointed towards that I could direct you to. But if you want to know how many people have voted, that answer I do have, because epcountyvotes.com does keep that rolling total tally, whatever the right way to put it is, the early voting statistics anyway. And we can see that for El Paso County, we are at in-person voting totals of about 62.3 thousand people so far. So that's why I'm hoping that we'll be able to reach that 6 digits of voter turnout. I'm hoping. Yeah, and I think there's reason to hope, specifically because historically, anyway, early voting has been about 50% of the voter turnout, and then in person is about the other half. So take whatever the early voting numbers are and double it, and that's how many people will show up in general. Historically and generally, past performance is no not necessarily guarantee of future such, but that's at least expectations that we can have. So that's some of the polling numbers, at least in our local area. So we are at above 10% voter turnout. Yay! But let's shoot for 20%. I don't know. It doesn't sound maybe the best way to put it here. But let's get back to those phone lines now. Again, the number to call if you want to get on the line is 915-544-5876, 544 KTSM. We do have Frankie and Messia on the line here with us right now. Frankie, thanks for joining us.
All right. Good to go. 10% for you El Pasoans. We're already 20% according to the two little voting machines we have in our town hall, which is over 20% right now. So you guys keep going. Now listen, I voted, and I want everybody else out there. Listen, y'all Americans, this is how we do stuff. We participate. You got your American franchise to get out there and state your case, push the button, what you like, what you don't. This is how we do it in the United States. And if you don't like what happens at the end, that's just the way it goes. Wait another 2 years. Wait another 4 years. But don't be going out killing people and wrecking the Capitol or threatening people and stuff. This is insanity. This is stupid people. Now, having said that, now the Fed chair just bumped up the Fed rate by another 75 basis points.
Right.
That's the fourth time plus a couple other things. I'm 100% in favor of that. We need to do something to get this inflation down. And I don't want to get into all to the weeds about this stuff. Guys can look up the economic ins and outs of how all this stuff works. But if you don't stick with the program, and right now, I don't care if Democrat, Republican, everybody that's doing this right now is doing the right thing economically, the correct way to get these things back together. But if we're going to sit there and say, wait a minute, I'm suffering more than this other guy, or this other guy's got more money, and he's doing better than me, then this is not going to work. You need to let the process go through, which is going to probably be about another 6 months, before you see, hopefully, some improvement. So everybody just chill out, let the process go, because as I told you this before, Andrew, and a couple other times, this is the 13th recession I've been through now. Not recession, inflationary situation. And I'm still alive. I'm still breathing. I've still been able to buy beer and Irish whiskey and having a jolly good old time down at my local beer mill. So people get with the program. Vote, chill out, wait, things will get better. That's my opening rant.
I mean, I get what you're saying there, but also, I mean, as we have had this and next, the cycle that they have been doing is this quantitative tightening, basically, is one of the ways to put it. That's more basically on the bond side of things. But the pain point, I think, is the real question to be asked here, because, of course, this has been going on and they've continued to do these. I think that it's not unreasonable to think that if this course were to continue, they may look at another, again, a 0.75% or that, 75 basis points you're talking about there, or maybe even a full percentage point change in the future, though it's some of the speculation anyway, so that's more cloudy crystal ball territory, to be honest with you. But the idea of them continuing on with this to deal with it, I mean, it's kind of like, the perfect squeeze. How do you put in just enough to not ruin some people's lives and cause enough pain that people are going to upheaval with it? Let's just say, globally speaking, that measures taken to deal with economic issues that are, we got to rein things in, or other places, austerity measures, historically not popular. So if they're not keeping in mind the balance between how they manage it and what they see needing to be done versus the people that are being affected by it in the meantime, they're probably going to find themselves out of a job as the people that are giving them the job are voted out of office. So that's the kind of balancing act that they're not considering. They probably should be, because sure, you may think like, we got to take your medicine, but if the patient isn't even going to take the medicine, then what's the point of prescribing it in the first place?
No, I hear you. You're 100% right. But the operative word is balance. But I'm not an economist. I understand economics 101, 102. But you're 100% right. Listen, we hire people that are brilliant or supposed to be brilliant to figure things out for us. That's why we vote. And if you're going to second guess these people on what they do, even if they're 100% right, and you don't want to wait until the end of the program to see if it does work, yeah, there's going to be people hurt. There's no question about it. Nobody ever comes out of these circumstances with a brand new set of clothes. That's all I want to say on that. Other than that, hey, Ben, what Rex said, don't ever forget it. Have a good day, Andrew.
You too as well. Thanks for the point in the call. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right. And with that, we got to take that next break right now. Coming out of this break, we will get to more calls on the line, more points being made here, including people professing their preferred ways of voting for in this current election. So check that out. Of course, comments continuing on there. But if you want to get on the line, that number again, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hello, I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update. The fourth and final part of the Sun Metro's rapid transit system is finished with the completion of the Montana Brio. The new transit center in Brio will open on Sunday to the public. The Brio is expected to connect riders to every corner of El Paso, including the airport. It will run from the far east side to central El Paso along a 16-mile stretch of Montana. And the city of El Paso is working to find ways to revitalize downtown. The project currently in the works is called the Downtown Uptown Project. The goal is to revamp the area by making it a place where people can live but also play. According to a market assessment, more households are necessary downtown to achieve that goal. Data shows that the downtown and uptown area have the potential to offer more than 6,600 residential units in the next decade. The downtown area currently has about 400 units, including new low-income housing. I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
On your El Paso freeways, I-10 eastbound before Dallas Street at Brown, there's a crash that's blocking the right lane and causing a 6-minute delay back to Campbell Street. On the 54 Patriot southbound from Pershing down to Alameda, it's a 21-minute delay. It's all stop and go. 10 eastbound at Geronimo, a stalled truck blocking the right shoulder. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, this is Chief Meteorologist Sandra Diaz. Well, our Wednesdays turned out to be another beautiful warm day, but tonight we should see a little more cloud cover and temperatures maybe a few degrees warmer. But it's really not until Thursday that we start to transition as our next storm approaches. So look for increasing winds and another warm day Wednesday with about a 15-degree drop and more winds for your Friday. Log on to kfoxtv.com for your latest forecast.
This report is paid for by the Texans for Greg Abbott.
Political ad paid for by Texans for Greg Abbott.
Beto O'Rourke stands with radical groups who want to defund the police. Governor Abbott stands with law enforcement so they can keep Texas families safe. Greg Abbott, Governor.
A construction site is a noisy place where things can be misinterpreted. We need to redo the drywall. It can sound a lot like,
Rewire the hull?
They're firing, Paul.
wait, what did I do? Or even,
Install a waterfall. Whose dumb idea was this?
be on the same page at every stage with Autodesk. From the designers to the field crew to the owner of the finished building. Autodesk Construction Cloud gives everyone clarity. Now, how about that drywall?
New on Curiosity Stream. Get ready for the best of the best with our 100 Days of Curiosity, featuring fan favorite titles like Light on Earth with Sir David Attenborough. Join me on a journey like no other. Stephen Hawking's favorite places.
It's a crazy world out there.
The History of Home with Nick Offerman.
Not my home, just homes. Other people's homes.
And many more. Don't miss 100 Days of Curiosity, happening right now on Curiosity Stream. Annual plans are $20, just $1.67 a month. Visit curiositystream.com.
Chris Cuomo is back with a new show on a new network. Catch Cuomo weeknights on News Nation at 6 and 9 p.m. Mountain. To find News Nation on your television provider, go to newsnationnow.com/join us. This report is sponsored by News Nation.
Why should you volunteer with Meals on Wheels? I never thought that 5 minutes could make so much difference in the lives of 2 people, but it has. Drop off a warm meal and get more than you expect. Volunteer at americaletsdolunch.org. Brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
KTSM AM El Paso is News Radio 690, an iHeart radio station. News Radio 690, KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, either over on Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk, the labels on those pages, on those places. A lot of comments coming in there, dropping those likes and reacts. The best way I can make sure I'm covering everyone who is responding here. Do have Flaco Jimenez, Calvin Williams, Amber Banda, Lorenzo Colon, Marky Mandingo, Ida Beza Gardner, Richard Genesee, Glenn Stewart, Carla Sierra, James Holmes, Matt Olson, Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, and Angel Rueda. Some of the comments, at least a specific question I wanted to get to here. Marky Mandingo asking, so more expensive money will bring down high costs? Short answer, no, but as anything involving economics is, it's a lot more complicated than that. It will slow inflation. So we're looking at the change of rate over time here of wanting it to not be at that, 8-9% that we've been talking about, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in those ranges, depending, as wanting to be down lower, because there's only been a couple of times within the last couple of decades, or really the last 100 years, that we've seen deflation, which would be the idea of actually bringing down the value of the dollar, among other things, or the actual amount that is cost to buying things. The value has been going down, but again, the CPI, that consumer price index that you keep getting talked about quite a lot here, has only ever really gone down a couple of times in usually kind of like post-war periods, among other things. So the idea is of controlling inflation, because otherwise inflation is pretty much there. It's pretty much omnipresent, but it's getting out of control. That makes it to where you start getting into issues where your money doesn't go anywhere near as far as it used to. I mean, sure, there's the whole, you used to be able to go to a movie with a nickel and have enough left over for popcorn kind of things, and we're clearly outside of those eras, but the idea of it being back under control is the idea. So making money more expensive also impacts on the money supply. Like, I have an economics minor that I mostly used to say, well, as an economics minor, ... But yeah, it's complicated, but the idea of making it so that the inflation isn't as high is the idea of making the money more expensive. And Calvin Williams on the idea of those in charge, such as at the Fed and other organizations, saying if they don't look at their approval numbers and adjust, they need to be fired. And again, if they're not thinking about it, they may not be. And well, some other advice here of interesting points here. Barbara Kodosco saying a good idea for to search for CDs, better than you have money sitting in a bank than earning nothing. Yeah, I thought about CDs, certificate of deposit, myself, but the fact that we will be still soundly beat by inflation. I am not an investment advisor, and none of this should be construed as investment advice, but I would say look at investments. I mean, invest in what's important to you that can maybe offer you, better rates, because at the very least, you want to be beating inflation. And Kevin Williams adding, yeah, money has been going further from my wallet. Absolutely. But let's get back into the phone calls here right now. Again, if you want to get on the line here, squeeze in here before we hit the end of the show. The number to call is 915-544-5876-544-KTSM. We have Eric on the east side here with us right now. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Yes, this is Eric, the philosopher from the comments.
Mm-hmm.
And I missed the first half of your show. But I did hear the parts of you and Barbara promoting Christian conservative bigotry and disinformation about trans people. It's really important to understand how Christian conservatives are advocating conspiracy theories in regards to how the pediatric and medical communities work to reject their findings and positions in favor of Christian dogma and traditionalism. Like, if you guys actually cared about children, you guys would be paying attention to the views of the pediatric medical community, and the process that children go through to transition. They're not just going on a whim. They speak to therapists, their parents, rigorously before they begin any process. It's not something that's regretted if you look at the statistics behind it.
And yet there are some statistics she brought up that, I mean, particularly when it comes to mental health issues and suicide, which firmly applies to that specific circumstance. And let me just dissuade you of something that you seem to be having the concept of here incorrectly. Just because someone says something on the show, particularly a caller, does not mean that it's agreed upon by me, the show, this management, anything like this, but they have, of course, the right to say it. So saying that I'm promoting these ideas of liking that is just a wrong conception at its very basis level. The thing that I think people are most concerned about, and where the concern comes from that she was more getting at, is the idea of this happening without parental consent. You mentioned parents being involved in that there. That's its own situation that I have a lot less issue with than the idea of it happening without anyone or any parental involvement, because the idea of that being able to happen essentially behind their backs is, I mean, that's something that I could, not having that situation in my life, struggle with on my own here. But regardless of the situation, one finer point I did want to make, so thank you for bringing that up, is that when it comes to the mental health issues or the mental health support needed for anyone, I mean, the trans community has a very nebulous phrase as it is. I mean, a lot of people think of it as essentially post-op, and having known people in that, I mean, these issues exist whether or not any kind of physical operation has been taken. So the mental health support, making sure that, well, dealing with suicide rates, among other things, those things don't get solved by saying, well, we won't focus on this, we won't look at it, to sweep it under the rug. That's a good way to make sure it continues. Frankly, the suicides I refer to there, and therefore entirely, unsupportable. So the idea of there being, counseling services available is one of the things I think that is the most needing to be focused on, particularly for, like we're talking about the younger age groups. When we start talking about adults, yeah, you're entitled to your opinion on that there, but generally people should be, as long as they're not affecting someone else, the whole your rights end where my rights begin, or the bridge of my nose kind of thing, kind of applies to my thinking on that point here. But I mean, of course, people are entitled to their own thinking on this, as you are as well.
It's extremely important to focus on their mental health and the medical community's views. You have the pediatric community, the psychiatric community, the endocrinologist community. The entire medical community is all in agreement in regards to transitioning for children, and it's not something done on a whim. Christian conservatives don't actually care about these children's lives and the suicides, or else they would have researched the pediatric community's positions. They would have looked at the data. They would have understood it, but they don't. They refuse to look at it in preference of right-wing conspiracy theories about how the pediatric medical community comes to its conclusions. This is causing children to die, and Republicans are making this in the policy, Christian conservative bigotry, and it's causing trans children to die and adults to die.
I mean, I think we're kind of talking crossways here, but again, specifically, I mean, the idea of someone making permanent bodily changes before they're able to and legally able to, because again, parental involvement and parental rights and parental legal responsibilities to their child are still very important concepts and really core to a lot of U.S. law in a lot of ways, regardless of whatever has been discussed here or policy you're talking about being pushed here. So I think that's where a lot of people come down to the idea of it being done without their knowledge and notice. I don't think that's really the conversation that's being had for the most part, is not people saying that, well, I mean, if you're on board with it, that's one thing. But if you're not, and it happening without your notice, I think that's where a lot of the concern comes from. And not addressing that, I don't feel is going to be anything towards solving or getting towards any kind of consensus on this issue here. I mean, frankly, the way the law regards this has changed a bit, particularly when it comes to, changing of names or identifiers or those kind of things. And it has even different a bit between administrations. But I think particularly talking about those that are legally not able to make these decisions because they are not of the age of majority yet, that just ignoring that and saying, well, you have to accept it here is not really dealing with that in any kind of substantive way. Again, I think that's why they think the most important part to focus on here will be mental health and support, counseling, those kind of things, because otherwise you are kind of leaving them, up a creek without a very, very specific creek with a paddle there. So then the idea of consent there. So we're going to take one more quick call before we hit that next break. So thanks for the point in the call. We do have a David in the Mission Valley with us here right now. David, thanks for joining us.
Yes, I want to. Okay, it's election time, and I know the elections are, but as far as they're national elections, but as far as I wanted to address this to the right-wing Republican groups of people, why don't they get a committee and try to get that Marine or a mercenary that was paid to assassinate Nicolas Maduro, and he failed, and he's locked up in prison in Venezuela. He has nobody says anything. Why don't they get Barbara, get a group of right wing people to go get him? And I got another surprise for her. For all these, Brazil just elected a socialist president. How every year you're seeing socialist presidents being elected to Latin America. What happens if Hugo Chavez comes out of those socialist presidents? And one was elected in Colombia. There's an America. The military has a base there to fight the drug war. They're fighting a losing war. Don't blame Latin America for America's drug problems. The problem is the people here that consumes drugs, and you know that's true. This country consumes the highest number of drugs, and they're fighting a losing war. And one of these days, don't be surprised if they get expelled from the military gets expelled from Colombia. This country is hated in Latin America. The Kennedy brothers had the right idea to try to make Latin America prosperous like the U.S., but they failed because they were assassinated. I'll tell you one thing, they don't stop and think. What happens if somebody like Castro takes over, gets people in Mexico, gets tired of the exploitations by the plutocrats of the United States, and somebody like Castro, somebody similar to Hugo Chavez or Castro takes over the country? There's a lot of rich American people living in Mexico. What would happen to them? Corporations too.
I mean, sure, there's a lot of U.S. economic and personal interest in Mexico. That's no secret here. I don't think Hugo Chavez is going to come back out of this, considering that he's dead, among other things. But a Hugo Chavez-like figure, I mean, really what you're getting at here is that, I mean, you're mentioning socialists specifically, and we're getting out into Friday territory here, but just to briefly address this here, yes, there have been socialist-ish movements, particularly Central and South America, but really they're more populist movements. And that's something that we've been seeing worldwide for several years now. The idea of, well, essentially it can come down to a rejection of globalism, the idea that the interconnected economy, that it was supposed to raise all ships, that actually was the phrase, an idea behind it, but that it's only gone towards it hasn't been spread out evenly. It's gone very much more towards those that have rigged the system, to kind of use the phrasing that's being used in this way. And so it was a rejection that way. And so kind of nativist, kind of populist, and in these flavors you're talking about, they're socialist or communist in their own way and stripes there. I mean, we'll see what happens in Brazil. Are aware of protests going on there, but also of some potential military action. That's a volatile situation. And frankly, there's a lot of volatility in the world right now. I mean, we have protests going on in different parts of Europe over fuel prices. We have a potential another soft, maybe hard revolution going on in Iran right now, whether it's like the 1970s or like about 10 years ago with the quote-unquote Green Revolution, something more on the line of like Arab Spring. There's a lot of volatility in the world right now, and particularly given the military conflicts that are going on right now, it's almost hard to focus on any one particular aspect of it. But Brazil specifically, yes, there has been a movement on it there. Whether or not they've announced that there will be a transition, even though there's reason to still keep an eye on it here. I guess you're getting a little bit away from me here, but just to say to your point there about what will be the relations with the U.S., I mean, yeah, there's a reason that the phrase banana republic exists, and it does largely have to do with the U.S. corporate involvement back through history, and getting over that and overcoming that would do probably a good long way to dealing with some of the issues and the reasons we see, well, immigration's issues on our border. So that's, there's a lot of interconnected ideas I'm trying to connect there. So we got to take that break right now. But coming out of this break, we are going to be, closing out the show, getting into what we can tell you I got coming up for you. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 westbound at Geronimo, a recent crash is blocking the right lane. Expect delays. I-10 eastbound before Brown downtown, an accident from earlier is still blocking the right lane and causing a backup downtown with 5-minute delays. 9-minute delays on the 54 southbound between Pershing and the 10 Gateway. Southbound Joe Battle at Montana, flatbed trucks blocking the right shoulder. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is paid for by the Texans for Greg Abbott.
Political ad paid for by Texans for Greg Abbott.
Beto O'Rourke stands with radical groups who want to defund the police. Governor Abbott stands with law enforcement so they can keep Texas families safe. Greg Abbott, governor.
Have you thought about getting dental implants? Has someone told you that implants cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a tooth? Here's something much better to think about. Affordable dental implants from 1995implants.com. The El Paso Dental Office, where beautiful, top-quality, long-lasting dental implants are as low as $1,995 per tooth. That price includes the implant, abutment, and crown, which many other places charge extra for. At 1995implants.com, we also offer a free consultation, free standard x-rays, and convenient financing. 1995implants.com. You're going to love your new smile, and your friends and family will be telling you how great you look. Best of all, your dental implants are very affordable if you come to 1995implants.com. For more information, see our website, 1995implants.com. That's 1995implants.com. Se habla español.
Ad paid for by the Sentinel Group. Attention Marines, military personnel, families, and contractors who were stationed at Camp Lejeune. Were you present at Camp Lejeune between August 1953 and December of 1987? You may be entitled to significant compensation. For nearly 34 years, those in the Marine Corps' base Camp Lejeune were exposed to contaminated drinking water, resulting in devastating injuries, including several forms of cancer, adverse birth outcomes, Parkinson's disease, and more. North Carolina's procedural laws have prevented victims from getting the justice they deserve, but passage of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022 would allow you or a loved one to file lawsuits seeking compensation for illnesses and injuries linked to the toxic water. Call today for your free consultation. 800-484-9358. Let our experienced attorneys fight to get you the compensation you deserve, and you pay nothing unless there's a recovery in your favor. Call 800-484-9358. That's 800-484-9358. Again, 800-484-9358.
Thanksgiving is more than cranberry sauce. It's about turkey. The 46th annual Turkey Trot. Put your running shoes on and meet us at the corner of St. Vrain and Montana. There's a 5K and a 1-mile fun walk, all to benefit our local YMCA. For registration info, go to elpasoymca.org. That's elpasoymca.org. Or at 6 a.m. on race day, Thanksgiving Day, November 24th. Trot on.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for having joined us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk. We've covered quite a lot of ground, more than I frankly expected to today, but hey, I guess that happens. Don't worry, Friday is still coming, and we'll still do what we usually do on Fridays here, even if our next week after that will be a little bit different with election coverage and all those things here. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to be talking with more, squeezing in kind of our last gasp with candidates, including a little bit more on El Paso City Council District number 1 there. A couple of comments I wanted to respond to there on the idea of what's important. We did have a call come in over the break. We weren't able to get on air here right now, but saying that forget all the misinformation, forget all of the rhetoric, forget all of the arguments people are making. Vote what's important to you. Vote what is affecting your life and what you know and what you have experienced here. So I'll just take it as all. Whatever you're doing, make sure you go out and vote. Again, if you're registered to vote, you better be using that, because I guess I just don't get it. Again, I'm that kind of weird person that will wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night thinking I missed an election, but we'll definitely not be doing that this time around. So we'll have to leave it there for today. I want to thank everyone that did tune in, call in, comment, participate in the show. The way that we keep talking about things that are important to you and us and all of us is very important to me. So keep doing that every Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. But we'll have to leave it there for today. Again, thanks to everyone who did tune in, call in, comment, participate in the show anyway. Really do help think it makes the show what it is, regardless of what your opinion may be. Still happy to discuss it. So we'll again do that again tomorrow as we are. So in the meantime, stay safe out there. Look twice for motorcycles when out on the road, and have a great evening, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 westbound at Geronimo, a recent crash is blocking the right lane. Expect delays. I-10 eastbound before Brown downtown. An accident from earlier is still blocking the right lane and causing a backup downtown with 5-minute delays. 9-minute delays on the 54 southbound between Pershing and the 10 Gateway. Southbound Joe Battle at Montana, flatbed trucks blocking the right shoulder. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
When we have a dedicated public servant, we need to hold on to them. We have that servant in Justice Jeff Alley at the 8th Court of Appeals. After practicing law for 29 years in El Paso, he gave up a law firm partnership to work at the court. Governor Abbott has twice appointed him to serve as a justice on the court, a principled conservative who fairly applies the law as written. We need to keep Justice Jeff Alley.
Political ad paid for by Justice Jeff Alley.